All right, we have fine audience members joining us. I am letting more and more of you in, so as those of you who hear my voice see me and are setting up your audio and etc., welcome. Thank you so much for coming to this lovely Tuesday evening shindig. I'm Linda. I am the assistant manager for Deep Vellum Books and the administrative and editorial coordinator for Deep Vellum, the publisher. We're so excited that y'all could join us for this event with such wonderful poets all coming to us virtually and being in one place through the power of the internet. As y'all are coming in, you'll see that you're automatically muted and camera off. If you want to turn your camera on to wave, feel free, but please do keep yourself muted until we get to the Q&A portion at the end. I am going to be introducing everybody, letting everybody come in and get settled, and then we'll get into this wonderful event. So it looks like we're a couple minutes past the time and people have slowed in coming into the thing. So I'm going to start official intros. Welcome to this lovely event. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the poets for being here. I'm going to do just a super quick prompt them to give a little intro. I'm going to start by prompting just right of me on my screen, Rebecca Wolff, author of Slight Return. Would you say a little quick word about your lovely book?
Sorry, I went the opposite way and like shut off my video. And did you want to record this? I forget if you said you did or not.
Yep, we got it. We're recording.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah, this book is Slight Return. It has an epigraph from Jimi Hendrix, which I will read by way of explanation of the book. Jimi Hendrix said, "I think of people who say that setting your guitar on fire has nothing to do with the music as cellophane, bags and bags of cellophane. Of cellophane, but in bags of cellophane. Have you ever thought of lighting cellophane on fire? There's no need to." And other than that, I just would say thank you, Wave Books. And it's I think my 5th book of poetry. So I feel blasé.
Good. Blasé is a good feeling for a Tuesday night, I think. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Next up, I'm going to introduce the lovely Dara Barrois Dixon. Would you just say a couple words about Tolstoy Killed Anna Karenina, Dara?
Sure. I was going to do exactly what Rebecca just did and read the epigraph. And so I'm going to do that. And it's January 25th, 1851. I've fallen in love, or imagine I have. Went to a party and lost my head. Bought a horse, which I don't need at all. And that's Tolstoy.
Fantastic.
See what he's like, yeah. So, yeah.
Fantastic. We love a great minds thinking alike. That's what these events are best for.
Yeah.
Let me get S. Yarberry. Tell us a little bit about Boy in the City. Perhaps you also would like to read an epigraph. I don't know. I don't want to put you in a box.
Yeah, no, I like the pattern. Yeah, so this is my first book, so I'm still feeling enthusiastic and all of those things. And I'm drinking an energy drink, which I drank a lot of when writing these poems. My epigraph is from William Blake, who I am obsessed with, and it's from the book of Urizen. It says, "I have sought for a joy without pain, for a solid without fluctuation. Why will you die, O eternals? Why live in unquenchable burnings?" So we'll leave it with that.
Yes. Okay. Well, welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Wave Books for helping us co-create this lovely evening. And I am going to just tell the folks watching at home, the plan for the evening, and then I'm going to abdicate the stage to these lovely poets. The plan for the evening is that we're going to have each of these poets read a poem. They're going to discuss said poem, and then they're going to do that hopefully twice, round robin. We're going to see how the time works. Time doesn't always work for everybody. And at about, with about 15 minutes to go, I'm going to return. And at that point, we'll do a Q&A. So, keep your thinking caps on for anything you might like to ask the poets at that time. So without further ado, we're going to go in the same order that I asked for intros. So I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca for a reading. Thank y'all again so much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so this poem is called Experiment, Institutional Critique. I was not able to be myself. Public muttering is discouraged by public. Publicly muttering, not literally, but publicly, you understand. That's 3 times removed. That's hearing what I would say if I said it, hearing what I say when I don't really say it, hearing and thinking about what it would sound like if I said it and I meant it. My son told me yesterday he can't view himself from the outside. He can only see himself inside, but he also can't see anybody else. He can only see himself and only inside. It's the only self he has, and he can't see anybody else. I can see myself only from the outside, and I can see everyone else from the outside too. I know exactly what the outside of everything looks like, including myself. And this is why they follow me around, taking snapshots of my style and putting it on TV, selling it to the masses only 5 days after I actually rocked that outfit, old Irish sweater with the elbows worn to holes, now on sale at Anthropology. They follow me from where I live to where I choose to live next, and they sell it to the upper classes. And the masses suffer because of my inexorable and unerring sense of what will be cool in the institution. The institution will be cool with my style. You can have it. You can't have it. You can't have it because you bought it. You bought it and you ruined it. I ruined it by being myself. I was not able to be myself because you bought it. That's not a good example. Let me find another example. Nightclubbing in the 80s. Shape of my ass. Shape of my eyebrows. Shape of my long, long fingers. Romanticism. People struggling with how to get outside their head. Reconciling their head with the cloud. The other cloud. Their other head.
Great poem. Yeah, thanks so much for reading that. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you were thinking of, or what poets you were thinking about when you say romanticism. I'm doing my PhD in specifically romantic literature, specifically William Blake. So I got a little kick out of that. So I was wondering if maybe you want to talk a little bit.
Yeah, I'm always thinking of Wordsworth.
Yeah.
When I say romanticism, like Wordsworth is the only romantic poet that I think I like, or I sort of like whatever critique I have of romanticism is pretty much really just a critique of sort of like the Wordsworthian, like as I interpret it, like the Wordsworthian sort of like I create my own reality.
Sure.
Thing, and so and the problems that has engendered, or or that it is engendered from, I guess, in people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like Blake is a huge missing part of my understanding of like that whole moment, because I really never understood the magnitude of Blake and I still don't, but I mean, of how like his production, I want to say, like interacted with those ideas, like what it was about in relation to those ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I won't like ramble on for a long time about Blake or anything at this reading, but I just want to say I just made a zine, William Blake zine, where I ranked all the romantics on whether I liked them or not, just for fun. Wordsworth was my least favorite, always is. So, I think he is really the antithesis of Blake. But yeah, I mean, Blake is really like a missing piece of that moment too, because he was so under the radar and not as public a figure as those other poets. So also thinking about, the way your poem started with this idea of the public and the institution, I think Wordsworth obviously is that pinnacle romantic poet in relation to that too. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dara, you looked as though you had something you wanted to add about like what's your feeling about romanticisms of poets, past and present? Oops, you're muted.
Thank you. Oh my God. I'm fine with romanticism. We're all susceptible to it. And mixing, I don't think I have a great historical understanding. I don't think I could make the list that you made, which I'd love to see.
Yeah.
I spent the summer reading all the romantics and biographies of all of them and mixing them all together and like loving that happening quite a bit. And so I probably have a big soup pot of romantics in my head.
I like that.
Not necessarily a good sense of you and you and you and you.
Sure.
I think some of us have a problem of romanticism, or I know that's like why I have often made gestures about commenting on romantic poets as being problematic. It's because I experience a lot of difficulties of romanticism.
Yeah.
And like a lot of my poems come out of trying to reconcile, like some of those damaging notions. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like the poem that you read because I like the give and take of inside and outside that goes on through it, and then the mix of. I think maybe I feel as strongly about the word institution as maybe you feel about the word romanticism. Like, because I mentioned it earlier when you talked about a community, and I said you couldn't have a community if it was based on an institution.
Yeah, I was really interested to hear you say that, knowing that you've been conjoined with one for a long time. And
it's a job.
Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, so shall I read?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a feeling, y'all, that this could be accused of being really romantic. But S will have to determine that. Maybe.
Okay.
All right. It's called A Few of the Crimes You've Committed Against My Heart. Arson. Most of all, arson. Tongues of flame, flare, lick, and like. I like fire, and I like water, and a good flaring. Larceny. A little bit of larceny, peppered with a few petty kickbacks, like a self-serve brain surgery. You committed fog against me. You committed horses against me. You attacked me with hummingbirds. You ambushed me with iridescence. You scalped me with trees. You blindsided me with stars. You pushed me over the edge with bumblebees. You broke into me with gills, me with lungs under my wings. With books, you electrocuted me. With words, You tore me to pieces. With wildfires, you blinded me. With inferotemporal neurons, you swindled me. You strangled me with satellites. With time and distance, you slayed me. You pepper sprayed me with music. You oversalted me with blizzards. You committed rain against me. You committed sharks against me. With rivers and meadows and mountains, you lied to me. With canyons and fog-shrouded peaks, you hid ravens there to kidnap me. You burned me with songbirds and nightfall and morning. You scalded me with flocks. You stole my tongue with tides. With all of this, you set me down.
Mm.
So
That's a great last line for that poem. That was so unexpected.
yeah, well,
Mm.
it's one of those poems that I like because it's so tempting to go on writing it forever because you can.
Hmm.
So it makes you have to force yourself not to write the same, like just use that form and keep going. And I think it's kind of exciting when you run into a form like that and can keep letting it be the engine that creates a moment for imagination to fall into,
Yeah.
So I like writing it for that reason. So
What was the title again?
a few of the crimes you've committed against my heart.
I don't mean to sound glib, but while you were reading it, I thought an alternate title could be "You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman." Because it's like,
That would be funny.
that would be really funny.
Yeah. Yeah. The titles are great like that, aren't they? I mean, you can change the entire story of a poem by focusing, like if that had been the title on it, it's still there like it is, but it would have a different take a little bit, on it. I sort of like it. I'm happy to use that as my alternate title sometimes. It's good.
Yeah, so thinking about it, about your poem as one that you could have kept writing, or this like poem that's an engine and that you can pour kind of imagination into. I'm wondering if you could talk about where you started amidst that poem that you could keep writing, if there was like that impetus or something.
I think I probably wrote the title down first.
Yeah.
And then I obeyed the title.
Mm. Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So that's not always the way I work, but I can say that is true about that one.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course everything in it is true, really happened. So
It feels like that.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I think about, like, I've written a lot of poems that are about love or passion for different people or places or various things. But whenever that's happening, I'm usually writing maybe with one person in mind, but also with everybody in mind, and then also with divinity in mind, and also with so I have layers of a dress that I'm making, and this one I think aired on the side of like the natural world. It's full of animals and insects and geography.
No, totally. And that's what I didn't mean to be so glib, but it's like, I mean, it's clearly, for me, it's describing that time where a feeling of like human connection opens a human to like that kind of like sublime natural experience,
Yeah.
And that's so wild that it can do that.
Yeah, it's sweet. Poetry's good like that.
Yeah.
So I guess we're on to you, huh?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yes, on to me. I'm gonna read a poem called The Scholar. Let me grab it real quick. All right, so the scholar. The sentence became a medium for desire to traverse. Then a livelihood began to take place. The difference was all in the performance. I dress up at night and watch the bugs fuck beneath the porch light. I wish to end it all. It rains again. There's an exhaustive sort of brutality to my life, a mundane existentialism that leans in close to the death clatter of that epistemic grid of what it means to be another undone suicide. I put the television on, a show, radiant theater of sitcoms where suicide does not exist, the hard word, the concept, the oblivious object, an addiction, this idea. If I enter the myth, what desires will I have to fill? I find myself asking again. I've often needed to save my life. A methodology to my existence is desirable, something excruciatingly formal. I speak in polemics, eternal and infernal. It's not really playful, the ending of my life, though theatrics are certainly involved. To cohere to the world we make ourselves up in. I twirl my arm around like a windmill, a chainsaw. I pray to Aphrodite with a penny in my mouth. There's a life we live and a life we forget. When the trees blow back and forth in the cold November wind, I think them torsos and heads shaking wildly in my window, occupying, the trees do, the corner of my eye. I can only think posthumously these days. The fire in my heart has gone kaput from etre capot, to be without tricks in a card game. My heart is out of tricks and the game has gone sour. There's a beach down the street that I never make it to. The texts gone unanswered, the emails, the calls. Sorry, I'm always chuckling. What is one to do? How malleable a lifetime of displeasure can be. Nightly I swarm, nightly I consider stars and winter mornings. I read theory on the discursive limits of sex, purpose, a charming little polemic to call a war upon my own polytropos self. This self that did nothing, really. The trees swerve outside. Of course I want to die. The trees swerving. Nightly I string myself up.
Wow. That's intense.
Yes.
Yeah. I love the mix of everything that's in there, with like the theoretical abstract ideas and the vocabulary associated with that.
Yeah.
Then the way more what I would call romantic, somewhat descriptions that you get into as you go into the close of the poem. Like it's really beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm. I want to echo that.
So it's your first book.
Yeah, it's my first book. Yeah.
Did you do it as a book or did you do a lot of poems and then make it a book?
I did a lot of poems and then made it a book. Yeah. Which, yeah.
I was really reminded something in the poem brought me back to this book that I just finished, which is a memoir by the fiction writer John Updike.
Oh, cool.
You know John Updike?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, he's like completely fallen out of any sort of fashion or like being read, but he was really widely read in the 1970s and 80s. Okay. Probably. And the memoir is called Self-Conscious. And it's in it he really writes like in this minute kind of detail and like total sort of the kind of like flaying disclosure of like personal minutia of he writes about like his skin. He has psoriasis, and he writes about his stuttering, like he has a habit of stuttering, and he like goes so far into these things, and he also writes just about like his family and like his childhood and his house that he grew up in and stuff like this. But it's like really interesting to think about, for me anyway, about the intersection of that with romanticism, like I feel like that was happening in your poem too, is like there was the confessionalism that happened, you know, in the 50s and 60s, and then like, and so it's like now we have this like amazing ability to be ourselves or something, but also be like experiencing this kind of like difficult grandiosity or like those kinds of things, you know, and it's just like all the same struggle as always.
Yeah. 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 No, I like that a lot. And now I'm really curious to look at that memoir. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And yeah, I think the self-consciousness, but yeah, I mean, I feel like writing that poem is both this like you know, kind of confessional mode while also being this kind of, you know, persona poem of something that's like both, you know, the scholar that like, yeah, I'm like a PhD student, blah, 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 whatever, but also kind of taking on this like kind of jokey vocabulary of the scholar with this kind of epistemic grid, you know, but using it, you know, anyways, you know, kind of messing around with those perspectives a little bit in and out. Was something I was thinking about when I was writing that. But yeah.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Your turn, Rebecca.
Okay. This poem is one where the title is the first line. If I were more orderly, the extraction of value, attachment to intention, 10,000 orderlies. If I were a hospital orderly, mucking out the stall of permaculture, dating myself, 10,000 enthusiasms, 10,000 maniacs, poop into a bucket, water the poop, make tea, pour the tea on the kale experiment. So far, it is all going according to plan. Avocado in the salad, shell of avocado in the compost, fruit flies in the wine bath, the cryptic coming back, you all understand me. I don't know, do you love me even crazy? What does crazy mean? Do you love me even bad? What does bad mean? I murdered someone. I just want to say that at the outset, flat out, side of the head with a shovel or pickaxe, something blunt but sharp, corpse overboard. And then I lied about it, worse, made art about it. She drowned, hit her head on a stump. And then worse, I told a lot of people what I had done. Sheer hubris, processing the head cheese like Melissa Sue Anderson or like Melissa Gilbert or any Melissa, spending a whole day smashing, processing a pumpkin, the guts and the meat, the seed. There's a couple of footnotes to that poem. For those of you too young to know who Melissa Sue Anderson or Melissa Gilbert are, they are the actors on the TV show Little House on the Prairie. They played the two sisters.
And 10,000 maniacs were back there.
Yes, that was a musical act starring Natalie Merchant.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that somebody said in the chat, I really like the poem. Also, I think someone doesn't have themselves muted. They're getting a lot of static. So I don't know about that.
Well, yeah, so the Little House on the Prairie, what's the person that they're all, Laura Ingalls Wilder, right? That's the real person, right?
The writer. I mean,
Yeah,
she wrote the book.
Yeah.
Book series, yeah.
Yeah, I went to there's like a place in Wisconsin, you know, that they call her main home or whatever. So I went there, just fun fact. Yeah, so can you talk a little bit about what like that show is kind of doing in your poem, or like how that like kind of, you know, came into it?
I mean, I have no idea. It's free association, really. It's absolutely free association. I think that, I mean, that also there's a little Smashing Pumpkins reference in there. I don't know. It's just like random pop cultural. I mean, it's about processing. The whole poem is about
Sure.
an attempt to like make something out of the crap that we live in, essentially, and like including avocados and compost and kale and so yeah, like the first line is the extraction of value, attachment to intention. It's just a little bit about being alive now and trying to sort of like work through the like materials that we have to live with, basically, I think is a way to look at it. And then I've noticed when I'm putting together the poems for this reading, I'm like, oh, I write a lot about essentially like criminality or criminal behavior and complicity, pretty much.
Yeah. In this new book, do you feel like that's like kind of idea of composting, or kind of like making something out of the garbage or the trash or whatever that we have left over or consume? Like, it's something that is specific to that one poem, or do you feel like it's something that this collection is like really kind of working with or on?
I mean, I've always been writing about. I always have like I've always been writing about sort of pop things to some extent, but so no, I think it's really just that poem. I mean, I'm sure that if I look through the book, I'll find other instances of it, but I'm like a sort of a automatic writer. Like I'm like so I don't often know exactly why I said something when I'm doing with it or anything like that, but so I definitely, there's a whole bunch of like social media references in this book, which I really wonder about that. How is that going to go in the next couple of years? Like, as social media has become assimilated so much into our lives that it almost isn't worth mentioning. You know, it's like, well, why are you even going to talk about that? Duh, of course. Instagram, blah, blah, you know. So.
If it's behaving metaphorically, it doesn't matter that much about what happens to it.
Yeah, I hope that's the case with these. I mean, I think yeah, I mean, I tend to write about it in the context of communication, like different modes of communication, like that we have moved through, you know, like the broadcast versus direct address, basically. And, so
Yeah, that's totally fascinating to say while we're on Zoom talking like this, you know.
I know, but it's funny because we're on Zoom, but we have what I assume is mostly a local audience. It's really interesting.
I don't know.
I don't know either, but raise your hands if you're from around here.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody's from Cleveland. Okay.
I think there's people from around.
Hey, Terry. Terry from Cleveland. Anyways, yeah, so Dara.
Yeah, I'm ready. This is a little poem called Telepathic Kinesis. The beautiful orphans found themselves wandering in a forest of terrestrial magnification. An enormous, oversized elk, an elk of epic proportions, a giant of an elk, followed their every footstep. They could hear the cracking of underbrush as his huge hooves hit dry wood and leaves. They could hear his breath. They heard the thunk of his antlers against a tree trunk as they climbed into an open window of a shack they found, wide-eyed in a green, peaceful clearing near a sweet little running river's edge. The elk stepped up onto the shack's little porch where it didn't really fit. Night fell. The moon rose. An owl flew over the water. The end. Yeah.
And then what? I'm joking. No, so the elk is left standing there ominously, perhaps.
I don't know. That depends on how you take it, I guess.
Oh,
I love the elk.
me too.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. I like the elk being on the porch where it doesn't really fit. Felt like very evocative in a multitude of directions. I both felt like it gave this great like spatial awareness, but also like this elk in this poem where you're not sure how to fit or where it fits or how to fit it in. I thought that was really wonderful.
and I liked it. I liked writing it because I was making myself go, this is going to be the shortest fairy tale you've ever written. You know,
Right.
and
Ever
that's why they
written?
had to be orphans.
It felt like they were very safe. Like that was I think why I experienced the elk as ominous, is that like, you know, it was bucolic in a weird way, like that they found shelter.
Yeah.
But
Elks
then
following them. Yeah. Anyway, so that was it was fun to read that. So thank y'all. So yes.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, I'll read this poem. It's called Down Below. And it's got a little epigraph. So Down Below is a painting by Lenora Carrington, and it's also a book that she wrote. And so the epigraph is from the book. It says, "How can I write this when I'm afraid to think about it?" Down below. The world around me didn't crash, it jammed, a car broken down, slow sputtering, then that ultimate fail. Even in nightmares, I learned there were lemons, toilets, shared cigarettes. When I asked for help, there was no help. I wore a blue dress. Sometimes I did as I was told. The woman in red stockings, her hair pulled back in braided horns, smiled through it all. I was transfixed. The world was ending. I saw it everywhere, this ending. I destroyed myself running from rain. I couldn't tell you who was who anymore. Either way, I was erotic. I was not to be believed.
Nice. Yeah, I like that.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Yeah. Are either of you two Lenora Carrington fans?
A little bit, yeah.
I mostly I saw that film Carrington a long time ago, and that imprinted me very strongly, but I have failed to actually read her. I have a little volume that was published recently by Dorothy,
Yeah.
put out like a collection of her short stories, and I started it, but I didn't get too far, not because I didn't enjoy it, but I just like put it aside.
Sure. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I almost wanted to ask you to read that again, just because it was like kind of fast, and I
Sure.
didn't have time.
Yeah, I'll read it again. Sure. Down below. The world around me didn't crash, it jammed, a car broken down, slow sputtering, then that ultimate fail. Even in nightmares, I learned there were lemons, toilets, shared cigarettes. When I asked for help, there was no help. I wore a blue dress. Sometimes I did as I was told. The woman in red stockings, her hair pulled back in braided horns, smiled through it all. I was transfixed. The world was ending. I saw it everywhere, this ending. I destroyed myself running from rain. I couldn't tell you who was who anymore. Either way, I was erotic. I was not to be believed.
So when you put your book together, how did you go about making the order of the poems in the book? How did you manage it?
Yeah, that was, it wasn't an easy task, but I have these I kind of ended up making these little sections. So I have a bunch of these that like come in as like these pillars of text. So those are kind of what section it off. And then there are kind of these little constellations of like 5 poems that come between all of them. So that's how I kind of ended up doing it, and kind of making these little galaxies of poems to come in between those. But the editor, Sebastian at Deep Vellum, had me rearrange it a lot of times. So it took a while to land on how it all worked out, but we got there.
I was going to ask you, how many times did you put it together?
Yeah.
It takes
Like,
a while.
yeah, a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So what do y'all think about time?
I think
There
that
we
was
go.
absolutely fantastic. Thank you all so much. I'm just going to take a moment to do this in my little bookstore space here. And if everybody else in their little bookstore space or house space or wherever you are wants to do that, I just wanted to thank you all so much for your reading and your conversation. It's so great to hear and see these things happen in real time. And I am going to open it up now for Q&A. So we've got about 15 minutes. If everybody who's joined us is interested in asking any questions of one or all of the poets, you can go ahead and put your mic on, your video too if you want, but feel free to do what feels good. Or if you want to put a question in the chat, I'm happy to read off any questions that anybody has out of the chat. I have approximately 3,000 of my own, but I will put them behind the pane of glass of my face until we get audience questions, if anybody has them.
Hi, I have a question for Ms. Wier. I really enjoyed a few of the crimes you've committed against me. I thought it was tremendous. Enjoyed it quite a bit. You mentioned that you could have gone on further with it and then further still, and I can see what you mean. In your drafting of the poem, did you in fact maybe overdo it and then pare it back to what felt right, or did it always kind of come out to be the size and shape that it has now, more or less?
I did overwrite it. I wrote more of it than I needed to write because I was liking doing it. And I also knew that I would be able to cut it back both musically and also because of what I thought I had done enough of. Just because I like doing it doesn't mean I should do it. And
Right.
especially if I'm asking other people to read it. I'm not asking them to write it with me. I'm asking them to read something that I've read and then thought about giving to somebody else. So I cut it back. And I hope in the cutting I'm not damaging it, but I'm taking away what's been done already in it, or I don't need to do again. Like that. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
I'm going to interject one of my questions, perhaps, since while other people ruminate on theirs. And again, if you have a cue and you want to put it in the chat, also feel free. But I was wondering if you could talk. I know we talked a little bit about the romantics early on in this convo, but I would love to hear a little bit more from each of y'all about what you see as the sort of lineage of your poetry. And for Dara and Rebecca, whether that's sort of changed over the course of your books, or if it feels like there's still sort of the same figureheads beaming down on you that there were at the beginning.
In this book, Tolstoy Killed Anna Karenina, there's a poem called Credits. And it's a poem that talks about what I took from you, what I took from her, what I took from him, what I took from them, what I took. And I started the poem because I had been reading and seeing in a lot of places writers say, oh, I took this line from so-and-so, or I took this idea from so-and-so. And I thought, well, I'm going to do this taking thing too. And so I did it. And I do have in the poem all of the people who have meant something to me at one time or another. And I also understood that I would never, ever be able to write a poem long enough to include everybody I would need to include if I was telling the truth about who affected me, you know? So I had to pick and choose and apologize at the end of the book for leaving out as much that was important as what I already did in there, you know? So, and I was watching a movie one night and I saw the word credits come up. And I thought that's a way better title. So, than taking. Yeah. So that's my answer. It's kind of vague, but.
Well, the people got to get the book to find out the answer. That's a great plug. That's what we love to see.
Yeah, I was keeping a secret. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think overall, most of my like influence is what I guess I'm calling extra poetic, like not directly like coming from poetry. And I mean, actually, I realized in reading that John Updike book, I was like heavily motivated to be a writer, or just my writing self. Like I started being like right around the time that I read pretty much all of John Updike's oeuvre in like, I don't know, sometime in the early 80s, I think I did. But anyway, I don't know, John Updike, what a weird impulse that was. But like as poets, I mean, I still have these sort of like same like lodestone poets, and they are Frank O'Hara, John Ashbery, Clark Coolidge, strange one, and I've, you know, and that's really, those are really like the ones, although of course, you know, those are the ones for me that were that are like ride or die, as they say.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely jump on the Frank O'Hara ride or die bandwagon there. And I mean, obviously, William Blake holds a special place in my heart. But yeah, I think, you know, I really like Lenora Carrington's work. I like the Surrealists a ton. kind of that whole kind of avant-garde moment is exciting to me. But yeah, you know, I went to Wash U and studied with Mary Jo Bang and Carl Phillips, and I think both of those people's works, I mean, you know, they both have a million books, but I think those were like kind of canons of literature in and of themselves that really influenced me and that excited me. But yeah, and then also, you know, I feel like especially more recently, yeah, you know, I'm trans, and I think these like trans writers who are writing right now are really important to me in my writing and thinking in this moment of our lives, whether it's you know, Josh Charles or Paul Tran or whoever. But I feel like that's also kind of new and pure excitement around some of the work that's going on. Yeah.
That's awesome. We have our host of our previous event with S. Yarberry, which you can watch a replay of on the event page, which you'll also be able to do this for, not to plug something else. Riley often says, is New York City really a great city, or is Frank O'Hara just a really great poet? And I think that's pretty perfect. So tack that onto your beautiful bandwagon.
That's great.
That is really good.
Questions? I open the floor. We've got one in the chat. How do your books serve the epigraphs you chose? And in what stage of assembly did you arrive on them? We'll do the order that we did for the thing. So Rebecca, if you don't mind starting.
Okay. How does my book serve the epigraph? Interesting. I have wondered about that myself. I mean, I feel funny, like, I mean, basically I was attracted. So the title of my book, Slight Return, is part of the song title Voodoo Child, Slight Return, which is a version of that song that is on I think it's on Electric Ladyland, I believe. And so, but I have a tendency to sort of be a little bit like a magpie with these kinds of flotsam jetsam bits of cultural material. So I grabbed Slight Return from that song title, and then later, like much later after the book was all coming together, I don't remember how I came across it, but I just like, maybe I don't know, on the internet, I found the snippet of Hendrix talking about, and it's actually, I found it's quite moving. I found the snippet in an obituary for Hendrix that was published in Rolling Stone, and I'm blanking on the name of the music critic who wrote the obituary, but it was somebody who had been pretty close to Hendrix and had like talked to him a lot. And so anyway, it was the thing that I like about the Hendrix quote is that it's spoken, you know, it's like it's transcribed as it was said, and it doesn't make a ton of clear sense. And that's what I like about it. And essentially that is how I hope to serve that epigraph, is by doing that with it, as I tend to do in my own poems. Yeah.
I love epigraphs because I think they are so revealing. Like if you have a chance to, like a poet who has 10, 15 books, and you put all the epigraphs together, it tells you a whole lot about them. And it tells you a lot about, it's funny because the way lots of the epigraphs in books come out about is that they seem to be saying something straightforwardly, whereas the poet is not saying that same thing straightforwardly in the poems they write. So it's kind of like, I'm going to have her say it and not me. And I think that's funny, and as a kind of like gesture that happens in our lives, you know. But I don't know, I think epigraphs are just, as titles are great, epigraphs are great. All of the pieces of poems are so great, and they all behave differently. you know, in their own ways. And so to answer India's question, if I don't have an epigraph, I'm not going to let the book go until I find one, or even more than one. And the 2 books I'm writing right now both have plenty epigraphs, because I decided I should use as many as possible. So
Yeah, do it up.
yeah, that's been fun. So that's what I think about epigraphs.
Yeah, my epigraph is from the Book of Urizen, which by Blake, and Urizen is usually is Blake's kind of like bad guy in his mythos. But I've always just felt like a special relationship to the Book of Urizen, because it's this book that's really about embodied, like a disembodied figure being made corporeal. And there's this really like I think epic scene where Los, who's Blake's kind of avatar, comes in and builds Urizen a body. And it's this really kind of surreal and like both painful and really beautifully written section of that poem. And so that's kind of what that's why I picked it from that book. It's one that's always really moved me, despite it being, you know, kind of a negative text in Blake's world. But anyways, that's where I got that from. And you know, I love having an epigraph. I definitely think every book should have one. I think it's quite like a little just a little manifesto at the start. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I just need to put in the neg. I'm like the witch at the christening or whatever, who like wants to throw, like, I'm gonna do a whammy on, like, I as a publisher for many years, I became more and more irritated at epigraphs, because it didn't always used to be the case that every single book of poetry had an epigraph. And sometimes people will even give like a different epigraph for every section of their book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that.
I just started to at time see, and Dara, this is what makes you so beautiful and generous and like loving and like filled with light as a human being, essentially. Is that you're just like, well, what's wrong with that? Whereas I'm like, this is annoying. Can people please stop doing this? Like, why does everything have to have an epigraph? And I'll tell you, there was a little bit of a reasoning, like for me, like you were saying, they function for you as kind of this wonderful way in which the poet gets to be direct when they won't be in their work necessarily. But for me, it always just has felt more of the time, it feels sort of like it's almost like virtue signaling or something like that. It's like a signaling, like, yeah, like,
No, you're
like
right.
This is kind of what
You're
I know,
right.
but like, what's wrong with that? I don't know what's wrong with that. I just find it annoying.
No, you're right, because like, I know if you look back at decades of writers' epigraphs, not only would you find that there was a time when not every book had an epigraph or used them the same way, but the same people are the people they picked to put their epigraphs from. Like, how many times have you ever seen Wittgenstein in an epigraph? Or how many times have you ever seen so X, Y, Z? You know, and people keep using the same. It is like virtue signaling sometimes. That's not in any way, to me, an arguable point.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you for letting me.
No, it's good. I'm glad you brought that up. And I love the phrase virtue signaling. It's one of those ones that's like, it's perfect.
I read something though today, I think, that said like, it basically was saying like, well, and what is wrong with virtue?
Right. Well, the signaling is what's wrong.
Right, the signaling is the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a question for Blake, I think, really.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna just real quick, I know we're hitting the time, but we got several questions for S back to back. And I'm going to make you lightning round S. This is like the most unfair thing I've ever done to an author on a stream. But we got 2 questions about your notes section at the end of the book, which is really cool that this person is bringing their homework to this fine event. But this person asked, what's the impetus in explaining the references, and how do you feel like intertextuality takes shape in your work?
Yeah, I think that, well, I'll answer these questions, and Michaela's question is great. Michaela's my friend from school, so I can talk about haptic touch with her one-on-one later, since I know people do have to rock and roll here pretty soon. But yeah, I mean, I have a big long notes section in the back of my book, and I really my publisher Sebastian at Deep Vellum asked me to go through every poem and just write down like what my kind of how I came up with it, what are like little things that made its way into it as I don't know, as homework for me or something. But I did, it was really fun. But kind of out of that, he was like, I think we could include some of this, and so I like having all that stuff at the forefront. I don't need anything to be too secret about where that little word was from or what that idea was from. And I really enjoyed kind of putting that all together in the back for those who are interested in it. And if you're not, you can totally skip it and enjoy your lives whatever way you want to. But it's there if you want it. And anyways, that was kind of my, it's not super intellectual or anything, but that was just kind of a joyous bonus, a joyous coda to the poems, if you want to look further into it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you all again so much for being here. Everybody at home, go purchase these lovely books. There's a links and codes in the chat for you to get 20% off of them, which is a pretty sweet deal, not that I'm biased. And so you should go read these poems for yourselves. And thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to Dara and Rebecca for being here tonight and discussing with us. And thank you all for loving it. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.